than a general attack, is there anything else significant about this argument?
Well, actually, this is a good one because it demonstrates some of the techniques they use. The most significant one is being fuzzy whenever you can. It has in there. It refers to Odell and says has been identified as a member of the National Committee of the Communist Party, and that this is the sort of the passive tense to avoid saying what you know. When you say someone has been identified, you don't say who identified him. You don't even say whether this identification has been confirmed. You don't say whether it's true or false. I mean, you know, one person anywhere can say something about anybody, and then you say he has been identified as a such and such. That's very important, particularly because that's in the present tense. It says has been identified as a member of the Communist Party. We know now that at the time when the FBI gave this information to his friend, they knew that was untrue. Because they knew, whatever might have been 10 years before, they knew at that time that he was not a member of the Communist Party, and yet they sent out this information saying he has been identified as a member of the Communist Party.
Was this a part of a broader effort on the part of the FBI to discredit the black movement and to tie the civil rights movement to communists generally and communist infiltration?
Very much so. It was one of the few instances where Hoover actually testified before Congress and allowed the testimony to be public. The line was that the black movement, the civil rights movement, was being exploited by communists. And this particular clipping is another example. Again, this is from the New York Times. Of this program. These are all, despite the fact that many of them have bylines, although this one does not have a byline, these are all based on material packets, press packets almost, that were prepared by the FBI and given to their friends in these stories. And in this case, it's even more significant because this was part of a campaign that was so organized that Hoover got his friends to write stories about it before his testimony became public, so that when the testimony then became public, as it did for this one, people would know about it. One of his very, very close friends was Joseph Alsop, who was a syndicated national columnist back then, and this was Alsop's column about the terribly sad fact that the civil rights movement in America was totally being run by the communists. This again was based on whatever the FBI handed him and asked him to publish. This was just 1 week before the other story where the testimony became public.
Well, there was an escalating battle between Hoover's FBI and Martin Luther King's SCLC and civil rights and then anti-war activities. How did it intensify from the standpoint of media operations against Dr. King?
Well, the first real escalation was in late '64, when I mentioned before that Hoover gave a press conference and called King the most notorious liar in the country. This was sort of shocking. It was shocking that he said it. It was shocking that he said it in the context of a public meeting with journalists, and it appeared all over the country, and the whole conference was reprinted in U.S. News and World Report with a tape. In fact, the tape was originally used, and this was one of the things that the House Committee found the most outrageous, in an attempt to try and drive Dr. King to commit suicide. Shortly before he went to get the Nobel Prize, the tape was mailed to him with a long letter basically saying, if you don't kill yourself, we're going to make this public. Nothing ever happened because he was getting so much mail that this thing, somebody made a tape of one of his speeches, and they put it in the back room, and they didn't get to look at it until about 9 months later, long after he'd come back, and then they saw the note trying to get him to commit suicide, and then 10 years later, we discovered that it was the FBI who wrote that note, and made that tape and mailed it to Dr. King.
That exists in government influenced and controlled, sometimes owned media, print, audio, visual media entities, and how that infrastructure gets focused on opponents of the United States, such as Martin Luther King. Do you see how this incredible power was brought against Dr. King and intensified against him during the last year of his life?
Yes, I think the main reason for that was very, very specific. There was one speech that Dr. King gave in April of 1967 at Riverside Church in New York City, where he came out against the war in Vietnam. And if you remember back to that period of time, this was a fundamental debate gripping every aspect of this country, the pros and cons of the involvement in Vietnam. And when Dr. King came out against the U.S. involvement there, this was immediately accepted by J. Edgar Hoover as proof that he was a communist, proof that he was a terrible person.
But didn't this have the effect of unifying all of the forces, all of the intelligence forces in the United States? And so it now just was not just an FBI matter, but it seemed to spread to military intelligence, central intelligence, and others.
Absolutely. Once Dr. King made that statement, the CIA in particular considered him and his movement fair game, even to the extent that their operations were limited to foreign policy. Again, because of the congressional investigations, we know that the CIA, which people thought did not operate domestically within the U.S., had a huge domestic program called Operation Chaos, which was designed to counter opposition to the Vietnam War. And even though they later admitted it was illegal and later admitted they shouldn't have been doing it, there have been whole books of congressional reports about all the Operation Chaos activity in the United States, and what they called black nationalists were a specific target of that campaign.
This continued to 1968 and his activities with the sanitation workers strike here in Memphis and his planning for the Poor People's Campaign in Washington.
Absolutely. The campaign against Dr. King's activities went up to the very last day of his life. In particular, on his involvement with the strike in Memphis, the FBI decided at that point to try to spread stories that he was encouraging violence. One of the key articles was in the Christian Science Monitor in the end of March of '68, and again gives all of the themes that the FBI wanted planted, particularly about violence. The article uses bizarre language for something about a small strike in a medium-sized town that was something, but was not like an earth-shaking event. This was a sanitation worker strike, and this story refers to it as a potentially cataclysmic racial confrontation. Not quite World War III, but along that kind of language. And the stories that began to appear, and this is just before Dr. King was killed, were suggesting that he was closely allied with violent forces.